Welcome back, children. I wanted to say thank you for 500 subscribers. So in honor of that, I wanted to let you guys know that I teamed up with Teespring and now have merch available at low prices. Be sure to check it out in the link at the top of the description. Now with that said, I have 2 backwoods stories for you tonight. So let's get right into it. When I was around 8 years old, our house just set off the road, but the trees were so thick you would never see it if you weren't looking for it. My parents owned 55 acres of land, almost entirely forest, and our closest neighbors were a pretty good distance away, probably about half a mile down the road, but only a few hundred yards if you walked straight through the woods. We had dozens of trails leading into the woods around our yard, and they all covered about 50 yards into the woods in a giant field, surrounded by forest on all sides, where we had our septic tanks buried. Now, from this central hub of trails, you could see onto our neighbor's property, so I knew very soon after we moved in that they kept goats and other livestock in the fields behind their house. Frequently, the goats would find their way through the wire fence and end up following the trails into our backyard. This happened every couple weeks, and it was usually the same goat, who we started calling Bubbles. Yeah, Bubbles. I'm not kidding. We would usually just yell, "Go home, Bubbles!" at it until it retreated back down the trails and out of sight. One Saturday, as I was sitting home alone, I looked out back and saw a familiar shape coming down the trail. Thinking it was Bubbles, I walked out the back door, prepared to shout like an idiot at this dumb farm animal until it went home, or at least into the woods to do whatever goats do in the woods. As it got closer, however, I realized that I didn't recognize this goat. Bubbles had gray fur, with a black spot on her eye. This goat was black as midnight. So much so that I could barely tell where its eyes were. Growing tired of these random goats constantly invading my yard, I decided to walk this goat back home and try to find a spot where it broke through the fence so my father could fix it when he got home. As we started down the trail, I noticed that the usual ambient sounds of the forest were very quiet. I could hear them, but they sounded distant, like all the animals had evacuated that section of the forest. We hit the trail hub, and I noticed that it was now dead silent. No animal noises, nothing. I also noticed that there were no other animals out on the neighbor's property. I wish I could say my instincts told me to leave, but they didn't. I was a confident 8-year-old kid. I could use the karate I learned from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to go toe-to-toe with Superman as far as I was concerned. But then I started to hear it. At first, no louder than a whisper. Someone was talking. I couldn't tell where it was coming from, because it seemed to be coming from all around me. I could just barely make out the words. "Come here, boy. Come here." So, being the fearless 8-year-old, I called out, "Who's that?" Apparently, that was the wrong answer. The woods around me exploded with a noise that I can only describe as the sound a bass guitar would make if you tuned it down incredibly low and then slapped every string as hard as you could. I could feel the percussive notes throughout my body, and I immediately started running from my house, screaming. As I reached the edge of the clearing, I looked back and saw the goat standing. It was on its rear legs, with its front legs up like a dog trying to reach a treat above its head. I could tell it was staring at me. I ran faster than I ever have before. When I got home, my dad was already there, and I told him about the goat. "Yeah, you've seen them before. The neighbor's goats come around all the time," he said. I didn't press the matter further, knowing he wouldn't believe me, and I haven't seen that goat since. But the whole thing still bothers the crap out of me. In my high school days, when we had nothing to do besides get drunk and have a sober friend drive us around while we acted obnoxious, we had heard a story that near my property was a haunted house with a ghost that would chase people down the driveway. We had nothing better to do, so we got the street name and set out around 11 p.m. to find this place. Turns out, it was much easier to find than expected. This house stuck out like nobody's business. It was the strangest looking house I've ever seen. The whole thing was shaped like a 30-foot tall bay window. One side stuck out, and the other side was completely flat. Like someone took a hexagonal pillar and split it perfectly in half, from one corner to the other. It was 3 stories high, and the way it faced the road, it looked like a giant vinyl-sided wall just sticking out of the ground. As we pulled up, we all saw a light coming from the top floor window. It looked like a green laser pointer, and my first thought was that one of my friends had one and was shooting it at the window, until I realized I was wrong. It was a ball, about the size of a golf ball, glowing that cheap glow stick shade of neon green. I then assumed the house was populated and that someone was inside with the sole intention of fucking with drunk teenagers like us, until it started floating. It started zipping around outside the window, darting back and forth so fast that I could see the trail of the after image long behind it. We were all caught in this trance, watching this ball like cats follow a laser pointer. Finally, it occurred to me that we should not be at this oddly shaped house with creepy ghost lights in the middle of bumfucked Egypt, and I yelled at my friend Ritter, who was driving, "Reverse now!" I guess my yelling broke the trance, because the next thing I remember, we were blazing down the road in reverse, faster than we ever should have been going. We were all still locked onto the ball, which was now darting towards our vehicle. As we left the driveway, the ball stopped, then made a clockwise circle in the air, and snapped back into the window like a slingshot. We made it back to my place without any other incidents, and we all slept in the same room with the lights on that night. Well, if you've made it this far and like these bedtime stories, I'd appreciate you sharing this video on Twitter, Facebook, or whatever you use most often. It helps more than you realize. Oh yeah, check in the description and follow me on all of my social media. I like and comment just as much as the next person. If you enjoy what I do, why not consider becoming a patron and support this channel? I'd really appreciate it. And remember, if you have any stories of your own and would like for me to narrate them, send it to CreepypastaED@gmail.com, or direct message me or private message me on any of my social medias. I'd absolutely love to hear from you and read your stories. Until next time, keep on creeping on.